Welcome again to another show of the Discover Trempealeau County Show, where we got a real good program today. We've got special guests here, Vitus Kampa. A lot of you folks in the county know Vitus. He was a county treasurer for many, many years. He used to extract the taxes from the public with a smile. Yep. He's always got a smile on his face.
I guess so, Olin.
And he's got the largest, perhaps one of the largest collection of Milwaukee Braves, not Brewers, Milwaukee Braves paraphernalia, perhaps maybe in the state of Wisconsin, and we're going to be filming that today and looking at it. We do want to express our appreciation to Rick Joten, Joss Lee, the summer trainee, and Mike Gillespie, who are here filming this show for today, so we thank them very much. It's going to be a kind of a difficult one with so much stuff to see. We're limited to 45 minutes, by the way.
Lots of things to see.
Vitus, where were you born and raised? Let's go into your background just a little bit.
Okay, Olin. Well, I was born in Independence. I went to school in Independence. I played baseball. Baseball was a big part of kids' lives back then, even more so than today. If you can imagine, baseball was bigger then than the Green Bay Packers and football is to today's kids. There wasn't much interest in professional football at the time, but I did play Little League Baseball. I've got a picture of my team here from Independence when I was in Little League. You want to see it?
Well, I presume you were a star.
Oh, yeah, I was a star.
Maybe you could just take this.
Yeah, I got this picture from, I think it would have been in about 19, well, let's see, I was born in 47, about 1959, 1958, somewhere in there, right when the Braves were at their peak. Yeah, we were the first team in Trempealeau County, by the way, Little League team to have uniforms. One of the players, two of the brothers had an uncle that was quite wealthy. He lived in Chicago. He owned a factory, and so he bought us uniforms, so we were the first ones. I can just point out a few people here that are on the team. People in the area might know. Donnie Powis lives outside of Whitehall now. He's the gentleman here on the young boy on the left, and Tony Brickner, who was a retired teacher here in the Whitehall School District. Connie Mersalik still lives in Independence. He works for the Ready Mix. Marcus Mish is the barber in downtown Independence, and Jack Helgeson here, he works for the city right now. He retired from construction. John Stendow now lives in Strum. Pat Myers is in Milwaukee. The Schmea brothers, Dougie and Pancho, Gary Schmea, used to be the mayor of Independence. Bobby Edmondson, again, is living in Independence, and Frank Hotchkiss, he lives now in Milwaukee, and the good-looking, looks like a slugger here in the front here with the blonde hair, that's me, Vitus Kampa.
Well, you got started pretty young with baseball then.
Well, yeah, that's all we did as a young boys. We had a Little League program, and we did, if we weren't playing with the organized baseball, we'd go up to the ball diamond and choose up sides and play baseball. We did that from morning till night, till it got dark. We'd be up there in the ballpark playing baseball.
Did you develop into a pretty elite star?
Well, I guess I did start all 4 years in high school. I was a starting shortstop for the high school, but I didn't go into professional baseball after that. Like a lot of guys, I fell in love, and that was the end of my ball playing career.
Somebody said that you were enshrined in the Polish Athletic Hall of Fame over there in Independence. Is there any truth to that?
I guess I was inducted in 1970 or so in the Polish Hall of Fame, Baseball Hall of Fame in Independence.
Nobody's ever really found where that's located in town, though.
It's a moving exhibit. They have it on the road. I don't know where it would be this year.
I think the last time I saw it move was out to the landfill, I think.
That's probably it. That's probably
Well, let me ask you, how did you get started collecting Milwaukee Braves memorabilia?
Well, like I say, baseball was a big part of our life when we were kids growing up, and the Braves, I would say, was actually probably as big as the Packers are now. I mean, that was the in thing. Everybody was a Brave fan, and everybody in Wisconsin was excited. When I was growing up, I used to make trips to Milwaukee with my mom and dad and my relatives. I had an uncle and aunt who lived in Milwaukee, probably half a mile from County Stadium as the crow flies, and I'd stay for a week or two at a time with my aunt and uncle, and I'd go to ball games. At night, we We used to go to the ball games with my uncle and aunt, and during the day when they were working, I would walk the mile or whatever down Blue Mound Avenue till I got to the cemetery and walk about a mile to the stadium. I don't suppose nowadays you'd let a 10 or 12-year-old kid do that, but I went to a lot of Braves games in the olden days.
Now, when did you really, what was the first thing you bought? You got thousands of things that were on display, and you had a bunch of boxes we never really got it into to the bottom of. When did you remember your first thing that you bought as the beginning of this collection of Milwaukee Brave collectibles?
Well, like most kids in that era, I collected baseball cards. Back in the old days, Liga store in downtown Independence, and I think there was a Myers grocery store in downtown Independence. They sold baseball cards, and like most kids, if I had an extra nickel or quarter, I'd go and buy baseball cards. I had boxes of them, and I did keep, like some other people, I did hold on to a lot of those. And then my aunt from Milwaukee, the one that I stayed with, she worked at the Pfister Hotel in downtown Milwaukee, and that's where the Braves had a lot of dinners and functions, and the opposing teams would always stay there. And I would get things from her. A lot of these collectibles, she would give them to me. So I started squirreling them away. And then, of course, when the internet became fashionable, or even before the internet, I would go to card shows. They'd have card shows all over La Crosse and Eau Claire. I'd go to Milwaukee, and people would sell sporting collectibles, memorabilia, and I would buy a lot of that stuff. And then when eBay came along, I used to really do a lot of that. But for the past 20 years, I really haven't added to my collection. I put it away, and until you started asking me, I got it out, and this is what I have.
Yeah, you haven't really had it on display any place or any before. This is the first time you really assemble it for total display.
Right. This is the first time. I did have little pieces of it, like in the farmer's store building down in downtown Whitehall. I had a display down there one summer. And I guess at a nursing home one time I had a little bit, but that was very, very small amount of it.
You know, I've known Vitus. He's been a good friend for many years, and I knew he was a collector until I went over to see this. You showed me just a little bit last night. It just boggled my mind with the total collection you have. But maybe about 25, 30 years ago, I got a glove here. It was, maybe you could hold that for me. It's an old glove that I used to have. It's the first glove I ever had in my life. I kept it. You can see it's been sewn up quite a few times. And it's even got a piece of my father's felt shoe. He used to wear felt shoes in the wintertime. An old felt shoe because it wore out. Well, I thought you'd maybe be interested in buying this. I don't know if you remember that or not, but it had a Babe Ruth written on the glove.
That would be highly collectible if it had Babe Ruth.
Well, it got Babe Ruth, but I remember, you maybe don't remember this, but it wasn't Babe Ruth there. That name wore out, but I traced Babe Ruth's number, his autograph, and I put it on there. I burned it on, and I was trying to sell it to you for a couple $100, but you can't.
Passed on it, though.
Yeah, you passed on. Would this be the beginning of your Milwaukee Braves collection right here?
Yeah, well, the Braves came to Milwaukee in 1953. Maybe I should give you a little history of
how do that.
About. They were in Boston. They were the Boston Braves. A guy named Lou Perini owned them, and he was losing money there. He was a construction company owner, and he was losing money. In 52, he lost $1 million, and he wanted to get out of Boston because everybody there was a Boston Red Sox fan. So he started dealing with some big shots in Milwaukee, and the guy that was the son of the founder of the Miller High Life Brewing Company, his name was Fred Miller. He was a big promoter. He was like Dave Pintock here in Whitehall, a big sports fan and a promoter of the local sporting scene. He started talking to Lou Perini, and he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll try and get you a stadium built. So he talked Milwaukee County, the county board, to build County Stadium, the one they just tore down about 6-7 years ago. They built that stadium in 1951 without a team. So then they started trying to finagle how to get the Braves to move to Milwaukee. And in the spring of 1953, about a month before the season began, this Lou Perini, the owner, he finally got enough owners of the other major league teams to agree to let Milwaukee get the Braves. So they moved 1 month before the season started, and they were a big hit. And I think in Boston they drew 200,000 people when he lost $1 million. Well, the first year they were in Milwaukee, they couldn't sell tickets in advance because they were only there 1 month before the season. They drew over 1,030,000 300,000, something like that. The next 4 years, they topped 2 million people each of the next 4 years, and they set all kinds of major league attendance records. Back then, nobody was drawing anywhere near 2 million, and people just went nuts about the Milwaukee Braves here in Wisconsin.
So let's just review again. They moved from Wisconsin, or from Milwaukee, when?
Well, they left Milwaukee in 1965, and that's another story. I'll tell you some of the background of that toward the end of the program. But, yeah, it was a bitter fight when they left.
They went to Atlanta.
Yeah, they went to Atlanta. And while they were there, this Lou Perini, before he sold them, he made $7 million, which was quite a sum of money back in those days. He sold them for $6 million to a group of guys from Chicago. And that's when things went sour. But I can start showing you some.
Okay, why don't you do that, Vitus?
Okay, in '53 they really didn't have much of a promotion that year. Of course, there was baseball cards, and half of the caps on the baseball pictures were M and half were B. It was kind of strange. Some were B from Boston, some were from Milwaukee. But in '54, everything was in line. They started the big promotion. And outside of County Stadium, there was a factory called the Johnson Cookie Company. And you could see the big factory. They had a big red light, and they started making these baseball cards. This is the complete set of the 1954 Milwaukee Braves. They were highly collectible. I picked those up from someplace. I bought them at one of those card shows, and this is kind of a neat little thing that the holder in there. Then I have, of course, all kinds of books on the history of the Milwaukee Braves.
How about the cap there?
Oh, this is the cap that they wore. Now, the Brewers had the old ball and glove, and now they've got some kind of a fancy dancy M, but this is the old Milwaukee Braves cap right there, the square block. This is an old one. This one is probably 25 years old. It wasn't back from the 50s. And I've got some pictures, I've got some tickets here from quite a few of the years, and you used to send, if you sent by mail to the Milwaukee Braves, this is the envelope they would send you your tickets in. You notice way back in those days there weren't even any zip codes. It says Milwaukee 13, Wisconsin. Are
some of those the tickets that you bought when you went to the game?
No, I picked those up at shows. This is a cushion that they sold at the concession stand that the ballpark people would buy and sit on those during the ball game. This is one of my favorite pieces here that I picked up at a church auction in Independence, St. Peter and Paul's. I think I paid $5 for this. They almost gave it away. It's probably worth hundreds of dollars now, I'm sure. I've seen it on eBay. There were a lot of different companies that made cars. The same companies today, Topps and Fleer and Donruss back in those days, but there were a lot of oddball cars, they used to call them. There was a dairy that used to deliver milk to people's doorsteps, and they used to, in 1960, they made baseball cards of Milwaukee Braves, and they attached them to milk cartons. So I've got just about all of those. This is the 1955 these are the 1953 Johnson cookie cards. They were the first ones to come out with them in '53. Post Cereal used to put baseball cards on the box of cereal boxes, and I have just about all of I've got many more in books, all the Milwaukee Braves off of cereal boxes. There was a company out of Cincinnati that made Conn's Wieners. They came out with a Milwaukee Braves set of baseball cards. I've got some of them here. There was a company called Salada Tea. They used to sell tea in a little box, a little square box about the size of this, and they used to put these buttons or whatever you call them here, coins of Milwaukee Braves. So they're highly collectible. I've seen a complete set of these are worth like $1,000. Well, I have most of them, but not all of them. And, of course, very popular items were the nodder heads. These are quite valuable. They always had pencils with Milwaukee Braves schedules on them. I've got a ruler here with Milwaukee Braves schedule from one of the years. They put schedules on everything back in those days. Here's a bank, a coin. You can put coins in there.
How about on the wall, next to the wall? What do you have there?
Well, this is a sample of all the different kinds that were made. These were on Dixie cups. Used to buy little ice cream treats, Dixie cups. They were on those. These are Topps. Here, Redmond. This is an odd one. Redmond chewing tobacco. If you bought chewing tobacco pouches back in the old days, they would have baseball cards on them. So I've got all of those Braves. These are more Topps. Topps is still in the baseball card business. Spick and Span was a dry cleaning company, and they used to do all the dry cleaning for free for the Braves and their families, and they came out with all sorts of cards. They had some of these like postcard size, and they had these that were called die cuts. Now these are one of the most rare Milwaukee Braves items you can find. This one is Gene Conley, but you can see his shoe is missing. If his shoe wasn't missing, this was probably going to be worth about $400. But a lot of the things I have aren't in the best of shape, but I don't put that much emphasis on that. Another one of my favorite items is this thing that came out of a bar. Miller High Life was the biggest promoter of Milwaukee Braves, and they used to put these in bars, and the bartender would keep the score of the game. I don't know if you can see. I've never liked the Cubs much, so I have the Braves 13 and the Cubs 0. You can change it. The bartender would keep the score as the game was going on in the radio in the bar. And Earl Gillespie was like the Bob Uecker back then. Everybody in Wisconsin knew Earl Gillespie. His voice you'll never forget. And he came out with a baseball game at one time. The Braves, going on here, they were always innovating new things in the world of baseball. They were the first ones to come up with the idea of Ladies' Day. They started promoting women to come to ball games. They used to give classes to the women to teach them the rules of baseball and whatnot. And they had special booklets here. This gives an explanation of all the rules of baseball, and they would sell them these fans to keep cool during the summer months. Going here is Jim Wilson, is a guy that played for the Braves in 1954. He pitched the first no-hitter in County Stadium. I have an autographed baseball by Jim Wilson, and here's the wire service photograph that came out the day after he pitched that no-hitter. They didn't have internet or computers, and they had telegraphs and wire service, and they used to wire these pictures to all the newspapers in the country. I have a whole collection of schedules. It's kind of hard to see, but every local business in every little town, every bar, every restaurant, they would come out with a matchbook with the Braves schedule on it. One of the neatest ones I've ever seen is one of the banks in Milwaukee came out with a schedule on like a silver dollar. It's got the home schedule on one side and the away schedule on the other. It's amazing how tiny they would have to put the print, but you can actually use it as a schedule. Okay, They gave out napkins to restaurants and bars and whatnot, placemats for restaurants. They were big into that. You could buy these glasses at the stadium. I've got one here with Milwaukee Braves. I have a whole bunch of autographs of different players here. I used to send these postcards to the players. You could get their addresses on the internet and then send postcards to them, and they would autograph them and send them back to you. I have almost a complete set of the programs and yearbooks. This is a program that you would get to keep score, the scorecard, when you went to the ball games. Just a whole array of different collectibles here. They used to sell these picture packs of stars of the Braves. You could buy them for probably $1 at the time, maybe even 50 cents. But you used to have 12 pictures of the stars, a small pennant, a little doll baseball uniform. You can see here's a bracelet that says Milwaukee Braves, an ink pen. They used to come out with Topps, the trading card company, came out with a complete set of stamps of all the players, decals you could put on your car windows, tattoos. You could get them moist and put them on your arm when you were a kid. Unbelievable, all the things that you could get when you were collecting Braves baseball stuff. Okay, the next thing I like to show you is I collected some Milwaukee Braves musical items like records. Miller High Life, probably in the late 60s, came out with a highlight audio long play album of the highlights from all the previous years from 53 on. Earl Gillespie probably in the 1970s, made a record of Hank Aaron when he won the pennant for him in 57. Aurora Vision is what this is called. This is a record with Warren Spahn's image on it, and you put it on a record player, and it would tell you a youngster how to pitch, how to throw a curveball and such. Then there's a funny one here. Lou Burdett recorded a song, 3 Strikes and You're Out. And then, of course, for the older folks, the Braves Polka. That was a must. They played the Braves Polka in all the bars.
Who is Lou Burdett? Lou
Burdett is the hero of the 57 World Series. I'll tell you all about him. He won 3 games of the World Series out of the 4 for the Braves that year.
He was a singer, too?
Well, he was a baseball star, but they turned him into a singer to make some money, I'm sure.
Well, I've got a question here. I picked up a book. You've got a number of books here about Hank Aaron and County Stadium and so forth. Bat Boy of the Braves. Is there anything significant about that book?
Interesting human story here. I was in Milwaukee at a card show looking at some books here, and there's a book, Bat Boy of the Milwaukee Braves, and it looked kind of interesting, and I opened it up, and lo and behold, the person, this was in Milwaukee, the owner of this book in 1957 was a Reuben Adams. Dr. Reuben Adams, my doctor here in Whitehall. He must have sold this book, or somebody sold this book to somebody that ended up in the fairgrounds in Milwaukee, and I ended up buying it.
Have you told him that?
Oh, yeah, I showed him. He got a kick out of that. Okay, moving on then, Olin. I've got a collection of yearbooks. This is just a sample of them, all the different yearbooks that they had every year. Programs and yearbooks, they're highly collectible right now. You asked me about Lou Burdett, Olin.
Yeah.
He was the star of the '57 World Series. He was voted the Sports Illustrated voted him the male athlete of the year in 1957, and I was able to cut this ad of after the '57 World Series. He was advertising for Rawlings baseball gloves, and I just happened to see that same glove on sale at a card show a few weeks after that, so I bought it. So
you didn't buy this new then?
No, I bought it new, but it's I use this glove. This is when I play ball. This is the glove I use. It's still supple, and
Lou's name is on it.
It says Lou Burdett, World Series champ here. Yep, Lou Burdett. So it's kind of neat to tie it in with that. That makes it much more valuable.
During the era of the Milwaukee Braves, Vitus, were the people in your town, Independence, really enthusiastic about the Braves? What way did they express it?
Oh, very much.
Were there people that supported other teams as well?
Yeah, yeah, there were always. We had a couple of Cubs. I can think of one Cub fan, Ernie Sabota. He used to be in the county board. He was a Cub fan, but primarily our big opposition were the St. Louis Cardinals. I don't know why there were so many St. Louis Cardinals. There was a guy by the name of Pep Posson. He owned a checkerboard Purina feed store, and he was a big ardent St. Louis Cardinal fan, and so were the Schmea brothers, the ones that had the butcher market, the meat market. They were big Cardinal fans, and everybody was interested in baseball. That was the summer pastime back then. I can remember before television, my dad and I would sit on our front porch listening to Earl Gillespie and the Milwaukee Braves, and our neighbor was Willie Schmea. He'd be on his porch listening to Harry Carey and the St. Louis Cardinals, and we used to holler back and forth, "Hey, the Cardinals are losing. The Braves are going to lose." You know, it was a lot of fun. I remember this guy with the Purina checkerboard signed Pep Posson. When the Cardinals and the Braves were always battling for first place, they were always two of the top-notch teams. When the Cardinals were on first place, he would put a St. Louis Cardinal pennant up on a flagpole in front of his business, and somebody would most likely go and steal it and swipe and hide it from him, and he'd get all upset. And the barber was Joe and Joe Gimza and his brother. I can't think of the other Gimza, but they were big Braves fan. And you know, the steep corner or the sharp corner in downtown Independence where the barber shop used to be, they had a flagpole there. And when the Braves were in first place, they always had a Milwaukee Brave pennant hanging there. Oh yeah, people were wild. Another neat story about Independence is, you know, we had 13 taverns in Independence. There was a lot of bars, and during the baseball season, and especially during the World Series in '57, I can remember that they were like 3 deep along the bar listening and watching the Braves on television in the World Series. I got out of school at 3 o'clock or whatever. I ran down there to watch the game on TV with all the rest of them. And when the Braves clinched the pennant that afternoon, they started a parade downtown Independence. And my dad went and he went to Torgerson's hardware store and bought a metal wash basin and something to hit it with, and he was the drummer, and Jack Hillary Halama was carrying the flag down the street. It was a big deal. Everybody, they partied for all night that night when the Braves won the pennant.
Well, tell me this, you know, back when I was a kid, there weren't that many baseball teams. You know, there was a National League and I believe an American League, but how many teams were in the leagues back in the 50s?
Well, there was only 8, as I recall, 8 teams in the American League and 8 teams in the National League, and then they started adding after that.
Well, you know, they were concentrated mainly kind of from St. Louis and east, you know, but then they started moving west.
The Braves were the first to move. They moved from Boston to Milwaukee. Then in 1958, the Dodgers and the Giants moved to California. So that created a stir in the baseball world because they had to travel back all the way to the West Coast. And then the Twins moved from Washington to Minnesota in 1960. So that's when then they started giving expansion teams. They started new teams after that, gave teams to cities that didn't have teams.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you're looking at one of the largest collection of Milwaukee Brave memorabilia, maybe in the state.
Well,
and
it's probably not the largest, but it's one of the largest. You know, I do have a lot of.
you should put this up in a little museum or something somewhere.
Well, probably I will someday.
Vitus Kampa Museum.
We'll get a grant from the county board or something.
You did.
Okay, well, going on here, I've got some of these, I don't know what you call them, collages of some of my favorite players. Johnny Logan. Johnny Logan still lives in Milwaukee. He runs for sheriff, or he did run for sheriff every other year down there. He never was elected sheriff. Andy Pafko, here's an interest. He was a local guy. He was about the only one on the first team from Wisconsin. He grew up in Boyceville, Wisconsin. They have a little museum for him in Boyceville. So he's a small town farm kid from western Wisconsin. Del Crandall was the star catcher. There's a bunch of his pictures. I've got some baseball bats. One of these, the Eddie Matthews one, is from when I played Little League. This is the one that I owned when I was a little boy. Eddie Matthews was my hero, and he was the star of the team. Good looking. He was every girl in Wisconsin's favorite, you know, at the time, Eddie Matthews.
I got to ask you a question about that bat. That was your Little League bat?
Yep.
It don't look like there's too much damage from those home runs as yours claimed to have hit.
No, not really. I was more of a bunter, and I drew a lot of walks.
They were scared of you.
I had a keen eye, yeah.
Say, you mentioned Andy Pafko. He was a pretty famous guy, you know, from rather close. Were there other people around the area that played in the major leagues that you're aware of, you know, from Wisconsin or this area?
They had a Jimmy DeMeritt that played for the championship team, and only a couple other Wisconsin local boys, but they did have one guy he would have made it big, but they had their eyes on him in the minors, and he was a hot prospect, but then he got in trouble with the law. He played first baseman. He was one of the best fielders in playing first baseman. He could really dig him out of the dirt, you know. He was terrific, but he got in trouble with the law, and that was the end of his career.
What was his name?
I think that was Ed Gein.
Oh, yeah. Now, come on. That's a big joke. Okay, Vitus.
Okay, going on. 1957 was the big year. The Braves finished second year after year after year to the Brooklyn Dodgers. Always came in second place, and they'd say, wait till next year. Well, 1957 finally got to be the next year, and they ended up winning the pennant and going on to the World Series and beating the New York Yankees. I've got a pennant that shows that the world champion Milwaukee Braves from 1957. I've got a ticket here from 1957. I didn't go to the game myself. I purchased that from a seller at one of the card shows. There's a little pennant here. I was at Milwaukee's first World Series, and I watched it at the Eagle Tavern in downtown Independence with the rest of the Independence folks. Here's a card for every member of that 1957 team, all the starters. Here's the starting lineup, the outfielders and the infielders, and Lou Burdette, who won 3 games. When the Braves won the World Series that year, they appeared on the cover of Life magazine. They had a huge parade downtown. Over 1 million people attended that parade in downtown Milwaukee when they came back from New York, where they won the series.
Could I ask you a question? You mentioned somebody's name that was instrumental in winning that World Series. I think he only played one game or something like that, one season, and he was over a 400 hitter.
Yeah, his name was Bob Hazel. They nicknamed him Bob Hurricane Hazel because when he hit the league, he took over like a storm. He batted 400. He was the only player besides Ted Williams to bat 400 in the modern era of baseball. He didn't play the whole season, half a season, but he was just phenomenal. He couldn't do anything but get a base hit every other time at bat. I've got one of his gloves here, Bob Hurricane Hazel. They came out with, but he was a one-year flash, a flash in the pan. The next year he couldn't do anything. He couldn't hit at all, and they sold him to Detroit. He was gone. Thanks for being around. Other things I have here is I have a lot of autographed pictures here of players that I sent pictures to, and they autographed them to me. A lot of them say to Vitus. Like people told me that are in the sports collection business, they told me it's not very wise to have them write to to somebody, just have them sign it because it's not worth as much. But I didn't care. I just had them all sign it. Stan Lopata. He was.
It looks quite a bit like your writing, Vitus.
No, these are true autographs. Stan Lopata, by the way, was my uncle who I stayed with in Milwaukee. He was his favorite player because he was Polish, and I can still see my uncle sitting there saying, "Come on, Stash." That was his nickname, Stash Lopata. He was Polish. Okay.
Who was the guy that you told me about that didn't play baseball for like 5 years or something, and they brought him up, and he got a walk or something like that?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
A guy named Nippy Jones. His name was Nippy Jones. He was a minor leaguer most of his career. He hadn't played Major League Baseball for 5 years. He was out of baseball since '52. The Braves had a slugging first baseman by the name of Joe Adcock. He broke his leg, so they needed a fill-in for first base. So they hired this Nippy Jones guy to come up, and by God, the World Series, the Yankees were ahead 2-1, and they were tied in the 10th inning, and the manager put this Nippy Jones guy in the ball game. He hardly played all season, and he came up to bat and he got hit in the foot. He started running to first base, and the umpire said, "Come back, you didn't get hit. That was just a ball. It was in the dirt." And so he ran and grabbed the baseball and showed the umpire there was shoe polish on the baseball, and the umpire changed his mind and let him go to first. They put a pinch runner in for him, and that pinch runner scored the winning run. So they tied the series at 2-2. Otherwise, the Yankees would have been ahead 3-1, and the Braves wouldn't have won the World Series. So it's funny how things change sometimes. The next year, he was out of baseball again, never played again anywhere else. So it's amazing how things like that happen. Okay, Olin, I've got some really neat things here. Warren Spahn was the ace of he's the winningest pitcher in the history of baseball. He still has the record. I believe he won 355 wins. No other left-hander has won that. I've got some articles about when he retired. They had a night for him, and I've got a little card here that says, "I helped salute him on September 17, 1963, and a button that says the same. I was there at that game, which I was, and I bought these at a card show. When he won his 300th game, they issued another little card that says that you were at the game. I wasn't, but I bought this at a card show later on. Olin, today is August the 17th. Do you remember where you were 15 years ago tomorrow, August 18th?
I wouldn't have remembered, but I saw your article on Hank Aaron, and you and I went up to Eau Claire, and it was a reunion for Hank Aaron. He played with the Eau Claire Bears, and they had a statue.
They dedicated
the statue, and Hank Aaron was there, and he gave a talk.
Yep. Yeah, Olin came there. He was a star reporter for the Whitehall Times and Trempealeau County Community Television.
I got to tell you about that. Vitus and I got into the press conference. You had to show a badge or something, and did we get something from the Whitehall Times or not? We said we were reporters for the Whitehall Times, and we got in, and we actually had an opportunity to ask Hank Aaron a couple of questions.
Yeah, Olin asked him if he felt discriminated against when he played in Eau Claire, and he said no, he didn't. But yeah, this is kind of neat. I had him autograph. I had him autograph this picture that I had from Sport Magazine, which I thought was really neat. So he autographed that for me. He was really interested, and when he saw that picture, he hadn't been familiar with what it was, and he wanted to see it. I've got a picture, actually, of him signing, me handing it to him, and so I can prove that that's a bona fide Hank Aaron autograph. Here's when he was answering that question that Olin asked him. I got a picture of that, and there's Olin right there, ace reporter for the Whitehall Times and Trempealeau County Community Television. Okay, going on. By the way, Olin, these guys, they're not like your millionaire ball players today. Do you know how much money those guys made a year, the average?
I don't have a clue.
$7,500 was the average salary that those players made. Warren Spahn was the highest paid player in the majors. He made $75,000, and like I say, he's a Hall of Fame pitcher, the best that ever was. And they were all mad at him. In fact, that's why they traded him away in '65. So these players, they had to have other jobs besides playing ball. During the winter, they had jobs. There was a guy named Frank Torrey, Joe Torrey's brother. He worked for Pepsi Cola. Lee May, he was an outfielder in the early mid-'60s. He had a show band, and I ran into him up at Eau Claire at Yard 4. There was a bar and a grill up there, and I saw his show. He had a band, and he sang. Many others had jobs. Eddie Matthews used to do autograph, or he used to do commercials for Munsingware. Lou Burdett used to do a lot of commercials for Camel cigarettes. You don't see that anymore. But anyway, they all had other jobs. Here's another collectible item I have here. They had a lot of buttons and pins that you could buy at the stadium, and I've got a collection of those. You want to ask me about the big three?
Yeah, who is the greatest player in the history of the Milwaukee Braves?
Well, many baseball experts think that this may have been the greatest team of all time because they had 4 Hall of Famers on that ball club. The big 3 were Hank Aaron, Warren Spahn, and Eddie Matthews. They're all enshrined in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Hank Aaron, I still say, is the leader in home runs lifetime, even though somebody surpassed him on all kinds of drugs and whatnot. Warren Spahn is the winningest left-hander still to this day in baseball history, and Eddie Matthews, he had ended up with 512 home runs. He was one of the stars, and I've got a collage here for each of them. And another highly collectible item from the 50s were these Heartland statues, Hartland. In 1958, they came out with them, and you can see I've got the 3 Milwaukee Braves, the darker ones here. They're from the sunlight. They get faded a little bit. And then a 25-year commemorative anniversary set came out. And so I've got Spahn and Matthews. I'm still looking for the Aaron one. I don't have that. But they were 3 of the greatest baseball players of all time.
Vitus, these little statues that you just showed, about how much are they worth?
Well, the original ones, the cream-colored, the darker ones like this one and the Aaron one, they're not in mint shape by any means. I would say they're worth a couple $100 each. The 25-year anniversary ones are probably worth $100 each. And believe it or not, they came out with another edition just a couple years ago, but they're really not very nice at all. They're kind of junky looking, and I didn't even bother buying those, but they're highly collectible. Quinn Riesberg in Whitehall in his bar downtown had these, and everybody used to ask about them. I didn't get them from him, but I got these from a gentleman in Wisconsin Rapids. I drove there to buy them from him.
Tell us about that magnet. There's a magnet down there. Tell us about that.
Well, back then, automobiles were mostly made out of steel, and the dashboards were made out of steel, and somebody put these magnets on Eddie Matthews here when I bought this, and I was wondering why would anybody want to spoil something by putting a magnet on there. But I later found that they came from the factory. Some of these came from the factory with the magnet on them, and so people would put them on their dashboards, much like Jesus, or these St. Christopher things. And a guy told me, he said, "Do you ever see ones with the magnet?" I was talking to somebody at a card show, and they said, "If you have any of those, I'll give you $100 for those magnets." So I didn't know I had this really until one fell off when I was setting this display up today. So I'll have to see if I can find out who that guy was. I'll sell them for $100, I guess.
Say, the Milwaukee Braves now, they're rolling along. They win the World Series. They come in 53. They win the World Series in 57. And they left after 12 years. Is that correct? What happened?
Yeah, well, things went sour. The pinnacle was 57 because in 58 they again won the National League pennant, and they played in the World Series, and they blew, I believe, a 3-game-to-1 lead in the series against the Yankees. And then the next year, I think they just started getting greedy. The owners, they wanted to make more and more money because they were making money hand over fist. But the big thing was in 1961, the county board of Milwaukee County, who had jurisdiction over the Milwaukee County Stadium, they voted to disallow people bringing food and beverage into the ballpark. And believe me, people used to bring beverages. They used to bring in cases of beer. Cases of beer. I have a picture of a guy walking in with one of those cardboard cases of Blatz beer. The first game I ever went to, Olin, as a young boy, about 10 years old, they were playing the Cincinnati Redlegs, and every game was a sellout. I got up in the seat, and lo and behold, a few rows on top of where we were, some group of guys were partying. They bought a ticket for a keg of beer, a pony of beer, and they set that pony of beer, which they brought into the stadium, and they were drinking like no stop of it. And when the Braves, the county board said no more beverages brought into the stadium, people got mad and they quit coming to the ball games. Then the ball club got sold. In 1962, Lou Perini sold them to a bunch of businessmen from Chicago for $6 million, like I said earlier. And they bought them with the idea we're going to move them somewhere else because we can make more money in Atlanta. So they squabbled and they fought, and there were lawsuits galore, but they had to play the 1965 year in Milwaukee, even though they knew they were going to be in Atlanta the next year. And it was just a bad situation. The businesses quit making schedules. They boycotted Coca-Cola soda because that's an Atlanta product. There was a boycott of Coca-Cola. It was really nasty, and they ended up leaving. They used to only draw 2,000-3,000 people, where they used to get 40,000-50,000 people at ball games. But the last year was really sad.
Well, how did the Brewers get in?
Well, after the Braves left in '65, all the lawsuits were lost in court by the county of Milwaukee. There was a young man, the commissioner of baseball now, Bud Selig. He was a big. He got to be the big booster. By the way, that Miller guy, he died in a plane crash. So they said that if that Miller guy hadn't have died, if Miller hadn't have died, the Braves would have never left. But Bud Selig, he was the biggest car dealer in Wisconsin. He took over the issue then, and he brought the Milwaukee Brewers to Milwaukee from. He brought the Milwaukee Brewers to Milwaukee from Seattle. They were the Seattle Pilots for a couple of years, and they came to Milwaukee, and they did pretty well after they brought them to the city.
Do you have a few more things to show here, Vitus? I'll kind of get out of your way
We're
here.
down to the end. I've only got a couple of neat things here. They used to have a booster club that was one of the biggest booster club in baseball, and they used to follow the team around from city to city, and they used to go by train. Most of the travel was by train, and they went to St. Louis for a series, and this is a menu from that train trip, what they served on the train trip. Blatt's beer, the breweries in Milwaukee, Schlitz and Blatt's and Miller, they were the big backbone, the big supporters of the Braves. And the last thing I guess I'd like to show is Eddie Matthews, who was my hero growing up as a boy, and he was the heartthrob of all young women in the state of Wisconsin. He was the best-looking guy in baseball and a Hall of Famer to boot. He had the honor of being on the first cover of Sports Illustrated, August 16, 1954. This is just the cover. I purchased that at a card show for maybe $20 or something. If you had this magazine, it would be worth like $400 because they had, inside of this first issue of Sports Illustrated, they had some baseball cards, probably about a dozen of them, and Eddie Matthews was one of them. I don't have those, but this is a highly collectible item. So that's about what I've got to show you, Owen. It's quite a story in the good old days of Milwaukee Braves and baseball.
With that, we'll see you at the next Discover Trempealeau County program very soon.